Hello everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Vinyl Obscura. Today we will be talking about collecting Chet Baker, the tragic and talented trumpet player. I first started having an interest in Chet Baker some 6 years ago when I bought his album Chet Baker Sings and the trumpet artistry of Chet Baker. This was a big leap for me since, with the exception of Billie Holiday and standards done in old musicals, I didn't think I was a jazz kind of guy. Well, maybe that's the fate of all record collectors, to eventually become jazz listeners. Anyways, after a few plays, I really began to like Chet Baker's music, and the more I read about him, the more interested I became. The conventional wisdom on Chet goes something like this. Up-and-coming young trumpet player has his heydays in the 1950s. After becoming addicted to drugs, heroin, and other opiates, his career went in a downward spiral. He then spent the rest of his life making subpar records in Europe, eventually dying in 1988. At least that's the view I gained from the initial reading I did. It was with some trepidation that I bought one of his later albums, Coming On, which came out in 1965 on Prestige Records. Sure, it wasn't his strongest album, but it wasn't the train wreck that I expected. A few more purchases, She Was Too Good to Me, Diane, Broken Wing, and my preconceived notions had been turned around. Chet, as he aged, did not play with the same speed and range as his younger days, but he began to express melody in a deep, emotional way that I've rarely heard anyone else approach. That and his singing ability actually got better, that is, until the very, very end. His music touched a deep, romantic, but human side. It can sound frail, like the anguish of the broken-hearted, or warm like a sunny day. His melodic trumpet lines flow like the best of Sinatra's singing, or the ease of a Billie Holiday lament. So where to start? That depends on what sort of Chet Baker fan you are. There is the California cool bop material, which existed patchily throughout his career. There is the slow melodic ballad player, and of course, the singer. I'll touch on a few highlights, but remember that Chet's discography is huge and confusing, with several albums being released under different names. That and the ever-shifting European labels he was on means collecting his work can get very expensive very fast. It also means there are many albums that I have yet to hear, which makes it all that more interesting as a collector.
Time after time, I tell myself that I'm so lucky to be loving you.
Early years. This usually means his time with Gary Mulligan and Chet's work immediately afterwards, and the labels Pacific, Barclay, or Riverside. His strongest albums from that era, The Lyrical Trumpet of Chet Baker from 1959, is the classic one that many people start with. With Bill Evans at the helm and a cast of Riverside all-stars, it is very accessible and also entirely ballad instrumentals. Another one is Chet Baker Sings. His very first vocal album came out in 1954 on Pacific. Chet's voice is, to be frank, limited in range, but there's still something about the honesty of his vocal style, closer to Fred Astaire than someone like, Frank Sinatra. If you do like his vocals, then also consider the three other albums from this era. It Could Happen to You, Embraceable You, and finally Chet Baker Sings and Plays. The third album here from this era is Jazz at Ann Arbor. This is the sort of album that can be used as evidence of Chet's abilities when he was young, and why he was voted as the best trumpet player in Downbeat magazine, even over Miles Davis. This is more cool jazz with a stronger bop sound than the previous mentioned albums. If this is more your type of sound, then the complete Pacific box set is also worth owning. Now we're going to talk about the year 1959 and up to the middle 1960s. By now, Chet has fled America, and he also turned down a movie contract. From here on out, minus the occasional visit, he remains in Europe. He spends 16 months in an Italian jail for heroin use. However, his strongest albums from that era are Chet Baker with 50 Italian Strings. With all those strings, the sound of this album can get a little cheesy. It is, after all, a product of 1959. There are 2 strong vocal tracks, though, along with some solid trumpet playing. The second album to consider is Baker's Holiday. This 1965 release is one of those in the style of albums that Oscar Peterson liked to do. Perhaps it was a cash grab on Chet's side, but his Ode to Billie Holiday is great with 5 vocal tracks out of the 10, and the beginnings of that melodic touch that he would mine so deeply in future years. His vocal range also seems to be improving here over his previous work. The third album to look at from this era is Baby Breeze. Like many of his future albums, a mix of vocal standards and, this time, dense flugelhorn playing. This 1965 release is often considered, by some critics, as the strongest album of Chet's career. I'm not sure if I will agree with this, but it is still a must-have for a Chet Baker collector. If you're more into the bop, pure jazz sound, then his recordings for Prestige are the best bet. Records like Smokin' and Cool Burning are a return to his earlier pre-vocal form.
My funny Valentine, sweet comic Valentine, you make me smile with my heart. You look so laughable, unphotographable.